Hey everybody, today I'm out here near Park City, Utah, and we're taking a look at the first ever Toyota Avalon all-wheel drive. If you've been looking at an Avalon, or really any entry in the premium sedan segment, and you want all-wheel drive, this is going to be one of the very few options available. Now that Buick and Ford have essentially canceled their sedan lineups, if you want a premium sedan with all-wheel drive, and that would be something a little bit better than the average mainstream sedan like an Accord or a Camry, you've got this, you've got the Dodge Charger, and perhaps something along the lines of a Kia Stinger. Three very different vehicles. On the outside, there's really no way to visually differentiate the front-wheel drive from the all-wheel drive Avalon. We have the same sort of front-end look that we have before. I'm not the biggest fan of this particular overall design. I do think that the Camry is a little bit more attractive. I also have to say in this segment, I like something along the lines of the Kia Cadenza, but it's not available with all-wheel drive. The whole reason to buy an Avalon has long been for interior refinement as well as extra interior room. But of course, the interesting thing is that the Camry has grown over the years, so we don't really find that much more interior room inside the Avalon at this point in time. If you're really looking for a lot of interior legroom, then you're going to have to go even bigger than any of the direct competition to the Avalon, because only something like a Mercedes-Benz S-Class is really going to give you that much more interior room. Moving around to the rear, you won't really notice too much difference between the Avalon front-wheel drive and all-wheel drive, except for that all-wheel drive badge over there on that side. We still have twin exhaust tips down there at the bottom. Now it's time to talk about the nuts and the bolts. Toyota decided not to give us a V6 all-wheel drive Avalon for one important reason. This drivetrain is shared with the Toyota Camry all-wheel drive, which is going to be available for 2020. The Avalon will be a 2021. That means that under the hood, we find the same 2.5-liter four-cylinder engine and essentially the same all-wheel drive system as the Camry and the Toyota RAV4. The big reason for that, of course, is sales figures. The Camry is by far the biggest seller when you compare Camry to Avalon, and it just wasn't worth them developing a V6 all-wheel drive drivetrain for these two vehicles. So that means if you want all-wheel drive in your Avalon, you're going to have to give up horsepower. This is the least powerful engine option available now. We do have the hybrid system also available. It's a four-cylinder hybrid, but it produces a bit more power than we see here. And then, of course, the over 300 horsepower V6 as well. Power figures for this engine come in just over 200 horsepower. You'll notice a slight reduction in terms of horsepower over the front-wheel drive drivetrain that we see in the Camry. That's due mainly to the way the exhaust routing has been done in order to accommodate the all-wheel drive system. Unlike other all-wheel drive options out there like a Subaru Legacy or the Nissan Altima, you won't find a CVT under this hood. Instead, we have Toyota's excellent 8-speed automatic transmission. So if you're not a fan of CVTs, that's one excellent reason to take a look at the Avalon. Now, unfortunately, fuel economy is a little bit on the low side. I was a little surprised by that. This comes in under 30 miles per gallon, meaning that the exact same system in the RAV4 is actually going to be more efficient. The all-wheel drive system doesn't affect trunk capacity at all, so we have exactly the same size trunk as the front-wheel drive model. We still have the folding rear seat backs, and there's also a spare tire there under the load floor. Clearly, the first thing you're going to notice about this out on the road is the lack of power versus the V6 Avalon. Overall 0 to 60 acceleration should also be just a little bit slower than the Avalon hybrid, since we do get less power out of this system, and we don't have the extra torque advantage of those electric motors. Overall 0 to 60 estimates at this moment are about 8 seconds for this model, based on what we see in the Camry, and of course the Camry all-wheel drive that's new for 2020. Direct comparisons are a little bit tricky because this all-wheel drive system adds about 180 pounds versus the regular 2.5-liter engine, but that's not available in the Avalon. It's only available in the Camry at the moment, so there's really no direct corollary in the Avalon lineup at the moment. However, the key thing to know here is that 0 to 60 time in this Avalon is going to be notably slower than most of the competition that you might be comparing the Avalon against, whether we're talking about an all-wheel drive Dodge Charger or something like an all-wheel drive Stinger. The Charger is available with all-wheel drive only in the V6 model. You can't get the V8, you can't get 700 horsepower in your Charger if you want all-wheel drive, but it still has about 300 horsepower, very similar in terms of overall performance to the V6 version of the Avalon. Now again, the basic reason that we don't have a V6 all-wheel drive option under this hood is because it wouldn't sell well enough in general terms. And the Camry is really the reason there, because according to Toyota, about 30% of shoppers will be checking the option box for all-wheel drive, but only about 6% of people will be checking the option box for the V6, yielding a theoretical maximum of about 1% of all shoppers or so that would opt for a V6 all-wheel drive. And they think that that's just not enough volume overall to adapt a V6 all-wheel drive system for their sedan products, and that unfortunately brings the Avalon right along with it, since the two are very closely related. And the relationship is definitely good for both vehicles because the Avalon definitely handles well out on the road. Toyota's latest platform for the Avalon, for the Camry, for the rest of their front-wheel drive lineup definitely has a solid feel to it out on the road. And with this all-wheel drive system, Toyota tells us that they have not just targeted adverse weather traction like ice, snow, wet traction, etc., but they've also given us a little bit of a performance angle. So depending on what you're doing with the Avalon, it will send more power to the rear to help improve the overall driving dynamics as well. This all-wheel drive system is active at all speed ranges. And you'll really notice that if you're taking off from a stop sign, for instance, and you floor it around a corner, it has a really good solid feel to it. It doesn't have any front wheel peel like you do find in the Avalon Hybrid, for instance, or of course, obviously in the V6, since it has considerably more torque. The downside again is going to be the overall acceleration. But aside from that, if you're looking for an Avalon with all-wheel drive, that's exactly what we're getting here. All the rest of the Avalon is definitely there. The soft, comfortable ride, the relatively quiet cabin in this segment, etc. And again, all-wheel drive is something that we don't really find in that many competitors. Direct competitors to this would be something like the Kia Cadenza very, very directly. That doesn't have all-wheel drive either. Something like the Nissan Maxima, no all-wheel drive there either. Be sure and let me know down there in the comments section below what you'd like us to compare the Avalon to when we can get our hands on one for a complete week, because there just aren't very many options anymore in the premium mainstream segment. So we don't have a Hyundai Azera anymore, the Ford Taurus is gone, Buick has canceled essentially all of their front-wheel drive sedans, and the Avalon has never exactly been the direct competitor to something like the Acura RLX or front-wheel drive Lincolns or Cadillacs, because theoretically, that's where the Lexus ES would come in. Now, interesting twist here, we don't see an all-wheel drive Lexus ES just yet. I wouldn't be surprised if one comes soon, since it is so closely related to the Avalon, but at the moment, if you want this format of vehicle from the Toyota Lexus conglomerate, the Avalon is going to be your option. Now, obviously, we haven't had the opportunity to run this through our usual battery of comparisons and tests, so we don't have any official fuel economy numbers for you just yet, but according to Toyota, this does drop below 30 miles per gallon. I'm a little bit disappointed in that, I have to say, because this exact same drivetrain in the Toyota RAV4 will give you 30 miles per gallon. I was a little bit surprised that the fuel economy in the Avalon, and really the Camry all-wheel drive, wasn't a little bit higher than the RAV4. I'm also a tiny bit surprised that they chose not to adapt the RAV4's E all-wheel drive system from the RAV4 Hybrid into the hybrid versions of the Avalon and, of course, the Toyota Camry, because I think that really would have been an interesting option here. And lastly, it's worth mentioning that this is the same hybrid system that we find in the mainstream versions of the Toyota RAV4. So this is not the torque vectoring system that we find in the top-end versions like the Adventure, the TRD Pro, and of course the Limited trim, or the optional torque vectoring systems that we see available in the Toyota Highlander. This really is based on the mainstream models of the RAV4. That also means that we don't get axle disconnect features like we see in the Highlander or in the upper-end trims of the RAV4. But that said, again, the RAV4 comparably equipped will still give you 30 miles per gallon, and this is a little bit lower. Now, at this point in time, Toyota has not told us how much the Avalon all-wheel drive will cost, but they have said that the all-wheel drive system is likely going to add only around $1,500 or so to the front-wheel drive model of the Avalon. If that's the case, then this is going to be a relatively cost-effective all-wheel drive option, because a lot of the competition out there, especially something like the Kia Stinger, you definitely have to pay more for the all-wheel drive option in that particular vehicle. You'll be able to find one of these on dealer lots in the fall of the 2020 calendar year, definitely after the Camry all-wheel drive, which is going to be available in April of 2020. That's why this is a 2021 model year vehicle and the Camry is a 2020. In terms of overall comparisons, that does get a little bit tricky because there's quite a lot that you can compare the Avalon to. This is obviously a very direct competitor to something like the Dodge Charger. The Dodge Charger all-wheel drive is available with a V6 engine, but it's a rear-wheel drive biased all-wheel drive system. It's quite a different character than the Avalon. The interior is also a little bit old school, but if you're after that rear-wheel drive feel, that's definitely going to be a solid option for you. We also have something like the Kia Stinger, which is a tweener vehicle. It's not quite as spacious as some of the large sedans in this segment. We don't have as much headroom in the back as we find in the Avalon, but it's also going to be rear-wheel drive like the Dodge. Cargo practicality and cost effectiveness are the two big selling points for the Stinger. Obviously, overall styling is as well. And you can get the all-wheel drive system with the optional 3.3-liter twin-turbo V6. So you get an awful lot more power out of that model than we find in the Avalon. But it's going after a very different customer. The Avalon is going after the traditional Toyota Avalon customer that wants all-wheel drive. So if that describes you, this is clearly going to be an excellent option in the premium sedan segment, and it's going to give you something that we don't find in every option out there. Even if you were to compare this to something like an Acura RLX, the RLX is not available with all-wheel drive for some reason. And in all likelihood, this is going to be less expensive to keep around long-term than something like that Dodge Charger. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below, and of course, hit the subscribe button because I will have my hands on this for a full and complete review just as soon as we possibly can. I'll see you all later.